live on that link now. That link has the YouTube, the Facebook, the whole cycle.
Oh, sweet.
So we're good here.
Actually, yeah, the link you just sent. Yeah. Let me send that out really quick.
Go ahead, get that, and then you had a lot of people see some Andrew Gall.
Yeah.
By the way, we are live.
Oh, we are.
So welcome to the show.
Yeah.
You can get doing that, and I will introduce you for those people that don't know this fine gentleman. This is once again the epitome of the show. I've never met you in the flesh.
We haven't met in person.
Yeah, never met in the person.
We've been connected on
digital friends.
Yep, Facebook and LinkedIn, I think, probably.
Yep. And I'm not LinkedIn. Nope, just good old fashioned Facebook. And you are a great dude. I hear a lot of fantastic things about you. There's been people trying to get me in touch with you for a hot minute.
Yeah,
you gotta get in touch with Andrew Gall.
It's great.
So Andrew Gall,
I'm glad to hear that.
Ormond based.
Yes, Ormond Beach.
Ormond Beach, very well known, but most importantly, we're going to be talking about some really sensitive things because I was telling you this before as you just walked in, you were one of the few people that got in touch with me that not only said you wanted to be on the show, but you go, I want to talk about, mental health issues, dementia and senior care, things of that nature, which is huge. And you currently you're running a facility is it in Ormond?
It is in Ormond
It's
Beach.
Called
Ormond Manor.
Manor. So you're in this.
I am. Yeah. And I've been in senior care in one way or the other now almost 10 years.
God bless.
Yeah. And now, with Ormond Manor, getting to manage a community that completely focuses on dementia,
right?
Memory loss, Alzheimer's. So yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
And I would like to, I'm super excited to have you. I would like to talk just briefly because I know I want to dive into it, but just out of my own curiosity.
Sure.
Who is Andrew Gall and what's your story so far? How long you've been in the hood and I want to get to know you just for a hot minute too. So what do we got?
So I moved up to Volusia County. It's been about 7 years ago now.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. When I first moved up here from Melbourne, I grew up in Melbourne, Florida. From Michigan originally, but we've been in Florida since 98.
Gotcha.
My family has. When I moved up here from Melbourne, I moved to Palm Coast, actually.
Really? We had you in the Palm Compton, baby.
So it was kind of funny. I had joined a senior living company, holiday retirement. And when they initially offered me the job, it was for a community in Orlando, which was a great setup for me. Whole different story, but I was fresh off of a divorce. And, dealing with all that stuff and looking for a change of scenery. Orlando was a great fit. I've got friends there, had an apartment picked out, did 2 weeks of training. The second week was in Orlando. I had a U-Haul in the parking lot of the hotel, ready to sign a lease and unpack. And my boss called me on the second to last day of training and said, don't sign a lease. You're not going to Orlando. We need you in Palm Coast.
Wow.
Had no idea where Palm Coast was on the map. Dead.
And the timestamp was when? What year-ish?
This would have been 2013.
Okay. So you're in a metamorphosis stage to begin with, and now you're getting we need you in Palm. And you don't even know.
No idea. Had zero concept where Palm Coast was. Literally was is that in California? Am I moving across the country?
Right.
So I came over from Orlando and I went back to Melbourne for a day, see my kids, and then came up to Palm Coast, got off 95, and here I've been.
Here you've been.
Spent my first 6 months in town living at the community that I was working for.
Oh, wow. You could live on campus.
We did back then,
wow,
which was an interesting way to make new friends in town. Where do you live?
I'm at the
road.
I'm retired, kind of.
So I was with that company for just shy of 2 years.
Okay.
After we filled that building in about 6 months. After I filled that one, I moved up to more of a regional position, and that's when I moved down to Ormond.
So, out of my own curiosity, have you always did you pursue an education that was in the midst of this? Is that how you became attached to this type of demographic of work?
No, so that's a kind of two-sided story. I've had 4 grandparents in my family who've passed away with Alzheimer's.
All 4, man.
Yeah,
dude. Condolences, bro.
So I've been around the disease and kind of around the business since I was 8. And a lot of this, all of it happened in Michigan. And the quality of care, this is back in the 80s and 90s, was just atrocious. Michigan's one of the worst states in the country for senior care to begin with.
Wow.
But especially back then, it's just really horrendous. So I kind of had that as some context.
Okay.
And then when I graduated high school, I went to seminary for a couple of years. That didn't work out.
Okay.
That kind of wasn't my thing. So coming out of that, I was looking for something to do. I ended up starting a social media marketing business that worked with the senior industry.
Interesting.
It was still all very new in general back then, but especially for that industry. I ran that business pretty successfully for about 1.5 years, and then I sold it to a big publication down in Melbourne. I worked with them as a senior living liaison for a couple of years, and then and then when things changed in my personal life, and I was looking to make a change in location, my parents actually worked for Holiday Retirement. They got me the introduction.
Got you.
That brought me up here.
So the intimacy with this what I consider to be a horrible disease, however we're branding it, it's still so foreign. It is. We don't from my understanding, I've dealt with it with some friends that are suffering from it. God bless and rest in peace. My aunt on my father's side had passed away just recently from it. And it's so peculiar, man. And I mean, obviously this is just part of the dialogue because I have nothing to tell you. I mean, you've gone, I can't even imagine. Let me ask you this. This may be off topic, but as we get into it, I mean, being that you've seen it from the inside out, do you have, and once again, this is for those that are listening, this is not a clinically based show. Like this isn't about Andrew Gall giving you what to do. We don't owe anybody anything anyways. This is, it's an open format, but do you have some hypothesis of like, because here quickly on mine, I feel now this is just a broad way of looking at it because I have a naive, I want to chastise and I pinpoint the pharmaceutical companies because I feel like one of the many ones, the common denominators of the cholesterol pills, your brain being cholesterol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that that's not like it. That's not, there's tons and multi-dimensionals and way more variables than that. But my opinion is it's got to be one of the major causes that we're seeing this increase, never before, unprecedented increase in dementia and Alzheimer's across the board in humans. We can't pinpoint it. We don't understand really why, how, et cetera. But yet we're continuing to subscribe these types of pills that are deteriorating the cholesterol because it's too high because of a poor diet. Is that a safe, naive layman's way of at least approaching like, hey, this may be something to look at?
It 100% is. Here, if you want to talk about where the spotlight's at right now, 1 in 4 adults is going to be diagnosed with some type of dementia, 25% of the population. Of that 25%, 40% of those will be diagnosed with early onset, which means anything before 65 years of age.
This is incredible stats. I had no idea about this.
It's mind-boggling. And the scary thing about that is just how little we actually know about the disease.
Right.
And we're gaining a lot of understanding about what the disease does and how it actually affects the brain and what brain deterioration looks like, which is helping us catch it earlier. That's part of the reason why the increase in early onset diagnosis is happening, because we are catching it earlier.
Right.
But none of that is really helping us pinpoint why it's happening or how to stop it. And you mentioned the pharmaceutical companies, and that's such an important conversation because like so many other diseases, 30, 35 years ago, pharmaceutical companies realized that there was a ton of money to be made in disease management, symptom management, which is why you have the Ativans. It's why you've got the Seroquels. It's why you've got the Haladols. But none of those medications do anything to fix anything. Yeah. And while all of this money and time and research was being put into symptom management, we weren't putting anything into curative response. There's really fantastic studies coming out of China, coming out of France, around stem cells. And, I think that the powers that be are in agreement around a genetic factor, where this disease is coming from, which for somebody that has such a huge family history of the disease, obviously makes it very personal to me. And, so, it's a hard conversation to have, especially on my end. We're dealing with folks that are in crisis mode where this disease has affected their lives to a point that, they're out of options. They can't stay home. They're unsafe. Something's happened. They've gotten hurt. And at that point, it's too late to have the conversation about how to fix it. It's too late to have the conversation about what we could have done different.
So crazy. Are you seeing at your right now, are we seeing like, what's the earliest that we're seeing it? Is there like a stat right now that it's like, it's been as early as 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? Is there like someone that benchmarked or that you've had direct with it where it's like so sad, maybe someone at 40 has walked into the facility and they're like, we need help for that, and you're like,
I haven't seen anybody. The youngest resident that I've taken care of with dementia was 56.
That's stupid young, bro.
I mean, that's 20. How am I 33? So that's 23 years from now for me.
And I can't imagine. So like you said, you bring up I've never had it affect me immediately. I mean, it's affected I can't imagine the pain and what they're still dealing with. My dad's brother and the immediate cousins and things of that nature, obviously being his wife, my uncle, like what it does to your life when that person has during that care. Right. Like you're saying, is it a safe statement to say publicly that there is actually nothing premeditated that we can take and or look into to avoid this on the
Nothing that we have definitive proof on. Now, with that being said, I think that there are a lot of, general lifestyle wellness is going to benefit, your life in a number of ways. Do we have scientifically proven correlation yet? We don't. But you need to watch your diet. You need to watch your alcohol intake. Right. You need to get good sleep. And you need to be aware of your genetic history. Right. And I think that's an important conversation for a lot of reasons, not just concerning dementia. Right. But understanding your genetic history, understanding what your family proclivities are, right, goes a long way in helping you understand, what to be proactive for. Yeah, 100%.
I know, once again, I don't want to throw you out and put you in a position where you're going to get battered, but I'm so interested to know. Let's hypothetically say your opinion would weigh very heavy on me. Sure, appreciate that. Hence, I ask. I would come to someone like you versus I would go seek pill mill. What do you think is happening?
I do think it's genetic.
You think
I do think it's genetic. And I think that as the gene pool continues to become more and more diverse, which is valuable, understanding, how the genetic influence on, the changes that happen in our brain when dementia becomes a factor, gets more and more complex, gets, more and more difficult to understand, which, if we're not spending our time and energy from a research standpoint looking at that, right, and we're not, it's part of the conversation. Certainly, it's certainly not the whole conversation. Then it's going to continue to be an elusive thing, and then we, our understanding of how to deal with a genetic factor is a tough thing too. We're having that same conversation with cancer. We're having that same conversation with heart disease. We're having that same conversation, with behavioral disorders, ADHD, ADD, those kind of things. So, that's my opinion. That's what I think from the research that I've read. Here's what I don't think. The commonality that happens when dementia affects the brain is a buildup of plaque that deteriorates the neurotransmitters. When those neurotransmitters deteriorate, it cuts off access to parts of our brain. And when access is gone, those parts of the brain die. That's what happens when you have dementia. Now, the things that cause that are different based on the diagnosis. Right. Vascular dementia is going to make that happen differently than Alzheimer's, than frontal temporal lobe, than Lewy bodies disease, than Parkinson's, and then 24 others that I haven't mentioned. But the root cause is consistent. Those neurotransmitters are being attacked for various different reasons, and when that happens, we lose access to that part of our brain. That part dies, and I'll talk about this in a minute, the difference between forgetfulness and dementia. But if that's what we understand is happening, and scientifically we do, I don't see any evidence of technology in a pharmaceutical format that's going to change that. That's just going to make the brain act differently. The things that are making the brain act the way that they are genetically based. They have to be. Right. Can they be exacerbated by things like diet and exercise and stress? 100%. Right. Of course. But they're not. Those aren't the causes. And, I mean, there's a bigger conversation there too, Chenzo, with, pills don't fix anything for anybody.
That's probably the most beautiful way you could put it. Not that it's beautiful, but you get my point. It doesn't fix anything. I'm learning as I get older to stay in my lane and to kind of keep my mouth shut. But one thing I'm having a hard time with is these pills, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I know I'm probably offending a lot of people that are even just listening in general at some point in this conversation. Like, well, I need to be, and I get it. Like, I don't want to rob anybody or anything. And maybe I'm chastised. Like, well, it must be nice for you because you don't have, I haven't. So I haven't. Yeah. So I'll be very honest with my peoples that listen. Like, I haven't. So I'm sorry, but it is hard for me when I'm seeing, we're not talking hockey stick stats here.
Right.
We're talking just an immediate, I mean, that's it. That's the statistical data. Is like that. It's gone from, and I'm no pharmacist and I'm no medical doctor and I don't know nothing. I'm just a dude chilling, hanging out.
Right.
But from what I see, it's everywhere. I think it's easier to ask somebody if they've got a prescription drug in their purse or whatever you got than it is for a piece of gum.
100%. And I think there needs to be room in the conversation for both things to be true. I think there needs to be room for us to say that if we've learned anything in the last 40, 50 years of medicine, we've learned that pharmaceuticals are not going to fix all of our problems. And there needs to be room to say that people's lifestyles have become so attached to pharmaceuticals because of the influence that they have in medicine and in healthcare in our country that they genuinely do need those things to live, to function, to interact in a way that makes them feel safe and secure and happy. So both of those things can be true. And I think the solution that we're going to find to that problem, that conversation, is going to be a decision that affects the next generation or 2 generations from now.
I agree with you.
It's going to have to be a complete change in context, in perspective, and in approach. And it's happening in Europe. It's happening in Japan. It's happening in Asia. So it's not an absurd concept. It's just something that is going to have to change. And I think it's going to have to change generationally in the United States. And until we get there, we need to work with what we have, and we need to, I think we need to preach wellness. I think we need to make those kind of things priorities in our individual lives. And then over time, as people continue to make those individualized changes, you see a greater impact in the way that society looks at it, in the way that, look, people are going to follow the money at the end of the day.
Yep.
And as long as people keep buying drugs and doctors keep prescribing them, pharmaceutical companies are going to keep making them.
Yep.
And they're going to keep pouring money into research that supports them.
It's a trippy world. And I've had these types of conversations before, and no joke, we could probably get kicked off. I'm not even kidding you. It does happen, but I'm willing to talk about one thing that I had this very, once again, a dude living by the beach mentalities. Look, if it was possible, because you hear about it, if you actually get yourself educated and you realize how like diabolical the bigger company, once you've hit billions of dollars, there's somebody there in that company that's a jerk. 1,000% guaranteed.
Yep.
You find me that guy in the office that has stolen or going to steal, period. So my point is this: when you're going to steal a little bit, you'll steal a lot. So that DNA is in that foundation. So that's what is affecting these laws, bylaws, etc. But here's like a whimsical way of looking at maybe fixing the problem. Imagine if there was a salary cap, like there's salary caps in sports and things of that nature. Imagine if like pharmaceutical companies, their job was actually to heal.
Yeah.
Whoa. Imagine that. And then there was actually a tapped out, like that's it. Like you were given, it was ran by the government, which they technically are anyways. Yeah. But remove the facade. Now it is the government, which it is anyways. If you don't believe that, that's another issue in itself. But I believe that all these pharmaceuticals companies are ran by government peoples that have fiscal interests. Yeah. But now remove that cloak and now say, hey, the government runs these things. They're here to help us. Right. But there's only a limit on what they can actually bring in per month without saving that exact number. And there's some kind of equation, some kind of algorithmic equation that for every life that's saved, et cetera, that's what kind of funding that we get. And if there's not an increase in the saving factor, you have
to be able to show results.
Bada bing. Yeah. Same thing with, you've been in this contracting world. If I don't bring results to my clientele, I don't get to just sit on a payroll and increase 25% next month just because. And if I'm just falsifying it, then by this time next month, my client's got me against the wall. Yeah. So it's a whimsical way of looking at a remedy that I feel like, which once again, I think you're very intelligent, man. This is already fantastic to met you and talk with you. Your vernacular is packed with, this is not going to happen tomorrow.
It's not. And you know what? And I think, and I'm okay with being an idealist about this, but, you know, the business of healing is a difficult one to put ROI on. Mm-hmm. It really is. And the only way that changes is if there comes a change in priority. And I'm not smart enough to understand how to make that change happen. You know, and that's why in my little corner of the world, you know, I try really hard to produce. We talk a lot with my team about outcomes. You know, that it's great to fill an apartment. It's great to move a new resident in. But when that person moves in, what has their story been so far? Mm-hmm. What have they dealt with? What has that family been through? And then what are we actionably going to do in those first 30 days, in those first 90 days, in that first year that's going to create an outcome on the other side of that looks different?
It's powerful, man.
We moved somebody in last week. And, you know, before she moved in, you know, her husband was distraught. She was wandering up and down the street. He couldn't leave the house, walking in neighbors' houses. You know, and she's been with us now for about a week, and she's made a friend. She's eaten more in a week than she had in a month. She's interactive. She's social. Her anxiety's gone.
Amazing.
You know, and so you look at those kind of things and you say, something's happening.
Right.
You know, what we didn't do is we didn't pump her full of pills. We didn't, you know, call a doctor in to diagnose a bunch of things. We just tried to take somebody at the face of who they are as a person, and not who they are as a diagnosis, not who they are as a disease, but who they are as a person. Right. So what can we plug into cognitively? What can we plug into socially? It's going to make an impact on this person's day to day. You know, and I think if you can extrapolate that approach to healthcare, to wellness, to medicine, I think you would start to see an impact on the way that the business of that is done. I don't think any of us should be naive enough to say that healthcare or medicine is going to stop being a business. Right. In a perfect world, sure, but we can talk about utopia on another day, right? Like, that's just not. I don't think that's how the world works, and I don't know if it should. I don't know if it necessarily should. People need to make a living. People need to be rewarded for their time and training and education. You know, I think doctors are paid appropriately. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that I don't have the energy to go learn all of that and be that. So I don't think that's the conversation. But if we could take just a little bit of the perspective that says, can I make my approach? Can I make my interaction with this person more about who they are as a human being and more about my relationship to them as a human being and less about the income that this person's capable of for me? Mm-hmm. I think we would find some really cool changes.
I'm loving this, man, because you have a very not being that you're in it and having the emotional anguish that you've gone through. And I say that for you. Like I said, you're not over here crying over here. But I can imagine you're not at all cynical. And there's a lot of other people that I feel that would be more, you know, burn it to the ground, a very anarchist way of, you know, let's burn this medical industry to the ground. Uh-huh. But I think you have a very humble, practical.
Thank you.
I mean that sincerely. And you hear what I find fascinating is that I've thought about this, not just in the medical environment, but in general, and what separates, I think, really great folk from just normal folk. And that is empathy and sympathy. And you think about it clinically, because once again, I'd love that you gave the precursor of like, I'm not smart enough to fix it. There's a lot of people that also think that I'm also one of those.
Sure.
I don't want to bring too many problems to the table because unless I have some kind of I don't want to talk about it. It's interesting that as a human being, as a species that we are, it's a fact that we all have our own fingerprint. Yeah. It's so fascinating to me. Then genetically in our makeups, there's few things that we share in common as a species. But most importantly, the common denominator when we give out these pharmaceutical pills and things of that nature, if they're not individualized, if they're not about the outcome, which is a powerful word and a way of looking at someone, is it's not now just a statistical stat that, hey, we got to get this person that has this disease at this age, get them in the room. You're looking at it as real people should be looking at it. And it's powerful. And I admire you for that. And that is, I feel like if once again in utopia, because it is far way out, but if it starts now, if the conversation starts now and the curiosity starts now and the questioning and the halting and wait a minute, I don't think it's okay. I feel like it's always okay to question something as long as you're looking for a solution to it. Don't sit in the question, look for it. And I think as a species, fingerprint, but there's one pill or maybe three, whatever. It's still for every variable of a human being's genetic makeup. Yeah. We have this one little tic-tac and it's not working. And I think it's safe to say, like you said, it's not going to be fixed overnight. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we're going to just rape and pillage and
right.
We have to come together.
And I don't think it should be.
Right. And like you said, I agree with you 1,000% as well, that I do believe that the entity and the machine and the beast of itself, the healing and or the medical industry absolutely will always be it needs to generate some type of fiscal income to pay, unless we change as a society in general.
And let me posit this. I think that I enjoy the romanticism of the kind of anarchist approach. But I think there's one thing that this business has taught me. When you work with a disease that is going to affect 1 out of every 4 human beings in the world, I'll meet 4 people between now and the time I check out at Target, right? And so one of those people is going to get dementia.
Yep.
When you interact that way, you start to realize that the us versus them mentality doesn't work. Because if I'm true to my principles and I say that I really care about helping people that have this disease and helping them cope with it, helping them care for it, helping them fix it, helping them live through it, survive through it, then I have to include everybody that could be affected by that disease. Right. And that's certainly going to include people who are on the other side of that imaginary aisle.
Yes.
Right. If it's me versus the billionaires in pharmaceutical, okay, well, that billionaire could have a mom who's got Alzheimer's disease. Mm-hmm. If it's me versus the politicians, okay, well, my congressman could have an uncle who has Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And so I can't be true to who I am as a person, who I am as a professional, who I am from a principle standpoint, if I'm not also willing to say the solutions that I think work for, Mrs. Jones who lives at the end of the street or Mr. Smith who moved into apartment 15, those things also have to apply to congressman's uncle and billionaire's mom. And I also have to have the same level of empathy, the same level of care, the same willingness to serve those people as I do the people that I see down the street. And I think that that's super important, and I have a very good friend and she and I were talking about kind of this world changing, goal, and we want to change the world. I want to change the world. And we kind of arrived to this really interesting conclusion where, when we talk about changing the world, it can seem like this intimidating, bigger than life conversation, but when you really boil down to essentials, we all have our world. And, in my world, it's Orem Beach, it's Volusia County, it's Palm Coast, it's senior living, it's, it's those kind of things. And that's a much more approachable change, but if I'm doing that and she's changing her world and you're changing your world, there's this cumulative effect, that as each of our worlds get changed and, and who's to say that the changes I make in my world don't affect somebody who's maybe has the Venn diagram, they overlap me a little bit, but their world is really completely different. Yep. There's enough of an impact in that overlap to create change in their world too, and I think that's a really beautiful way to cut down the divisive conversation of I think this way, I believe this way, and if you don't, you're wrong, or we're different, or we're not simpatico, because there is an effect. There's by definition, there must be an effect. I think that's a really cool idea to talk about.
Falling more and more in love with you, man, as a human being, dude. Because it can come off, who doesn't see a post today or hear that person that's trying to advocate and move in a direction to what they believe to be good.
Yeah.
And I admire that.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. But when your own bed isn't made and you know who you people are, and I was one of those peoples. And I wouldn't call anybody out if I wasn't past it.
Yeah.
I want you
we all have been.
Yeah, you got to make your bed first. And I guarantee you, it worked for me. That change starts in your farm, and then it's a trickle effect. And I describe it like this to make worse. Well, those that are still like, well, how can I change the world? How can I? Yeah. So put it this way: we in the beach area, which we suffer and deal with these sand spurs.
Yeah.
Right. You name me one human being that wants to step on a sand spur. I would love to give you a hug. I don't think they exist. They're the equivalent of a mosquito. They're a nuisance. They serve a purpose. They're a plant. But I don't like them.
Right.
Now, we as neighbors suffer from them. The irony would be someone who goes in that backyard and toils and spends 10, 15, 20 hours, maybe concrete your backyard, maybe put rocks there. Guarantee all it takes is your next door neighbor not to
do the same thing.
And all it takes is one, and they're all here. So it's funny because as you were talking about, it starts with the 6 inches in front of your face. Take care of yourself. And it's no irony that the airlines say, put your oxygen on first.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny that you always can catch a person or two in there that's never been on a plane maybe, and they're like, oh, that's so rude.
Right.
I put mine on. It always would help. You're going to die.
Yeah. And then you're no good.
So put your oxygen on first. I think about that all the time. I love when I'm flying. They say, before you help somebody, it has always go for emergency exits too. And they always ask, are you going to be able to help anybody? And they're like, yes. But put your oxygen on before you put somebody else's on, because it's going to go fast. Yeah. Isn't it powerful?
It's so powerful. And I want to shift back to the dementia stuff in a minute. But I love that you say that, because I think that there is this, kind of buzzword conversation right now, about acts of service and, give before you get. And it's an important concept.
Right.
There's value there. But man, how important it is to fill your cup before you can pour into somebody else's. And I think that's a missed, because the other thing you hear about all the time is this kind of hustle and grind mentality. And there's some people that I love and respect who talk about, I love Vaynerchuk and I love, guys in that vein, who are on this, hustle 2024, and there's so much value to hard work. I think there's fulfillment in hard work. But if you're not looking after yourself, if you're not creating that wellness, and who's to say, professionally, selfishly, who's to say that there's not a connection there to the things that plague us later in life?
I agree.
Because we don't put ourselves first often.
Well, I think I'm a huge fan of watching these small snippets online of this dude who has this YouTube channel. And I swear he's like 15. He sounds so young, but they're condensed 15 to 20 minutes. And shout out to this guy. It's called Company Man. And if you love to see how companies started, where they're at, good or bad, dude, 10, 15 minutes on the money. And they're all about the beginning, middle, and end. And I find it fascinating because most of these companies, big or small, they all have a story. They're all people. Yeah. But there was a tipping point many, many moons ago, Andrew, consumerism. And when consumerism became no longer for value and it became more of the revenue based, I don't know when it happened. I'm not smart enough to know. I don't even care enough yet to really find out. But there was definitely a seismic shift. And it was maybe pre-Coca-Cola days when all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, we can make this much more and do it this much more and fake it this much more. Here's a naive, once again, an idiot beach dude mentality towards what I also think is happening. We as humans are always going to deal with a food issue. Not only just do we want to entertain and satisfy, but we need to eat. Right. Without a doubt, from what I've learned with my little naive education, that I've seen that our eatings, our foods, have become more and more processed. And once that's another you can't even, you can't say bomb on an airplane. Yeah. So like you can't say processed and organic and this, and what really does all that even mean? Right. But let's just take it at face value. We know that our foods have the dyes, the this, the that, the fragrances. I feel that now that the majority of the intake of food that we have has become fake, let's just use that as a layman's perspective, that's why I feel like maybe our bodies have been now suffering
100%,
where there's our brains, our muscles, our bodies are looking for that resource.
Yeah.
And we go, oh no, I took a protein shake in the morning.
I mean, look, there is no question in my mind, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, so it's impossible for me to draw a direct correlation, but there is no doubt in my mind that as our diets have gotten worse, as our access to natural food has gotten more restricted, the effect on our personal well-being has magnified. And whether or not we're going to eventually be able to draw direct lines to specific diagnosis, I don't know. And that's not my job. I don't want it to be my job. But I don't think it takes any kind of an education to say if we have continued to take the things that we need for sustenance, sleep, food, socialization, and we have degraded the manner in which we ingest those things. We eat worse food. We socialize with people less. We interact with people in worse ways. We do it digitally. Do it through social media. We have fewer and fewer of conversations that happen like this, and we sleep poorly because we're staring at screens, because we have to have, I have to have a book playing while I go to sleep. Like I can't go to sleep without one. So as those two things have degraded, our overall well-being is going to suffer. It has to. It doesn't take a scientist to figure that out. And what we probably won't know in our lifetimes is what the lines are to specific diagnosis, and that's unfortunate, because I think that once we are able to arrive at those conclusions, we're going to start saving lives.
It's I'm still beyond blessed to have a pair of grandparents. My mom's parents are still with us, and it's funny because when I see them in a situation where there may be a person that is on fire for their new way of living and whatever it may be. And once again, you called it like the romanticism of whatever they believe in that moment. I always find it funny because I've said this to my grandmother and grandfather in private a lot. I say, they would have the right to write God bless, they're 80 some odd years old, fit, sound mind, sound body. And it's like, what did you do? What you've broken every statistical data so far. You're still on, and you're continue every day. You're breaking another stat for our population as a species. And it's funny because you look back, and once again, I'm not educated enough or understand it enough to where I would be able to look at it. But you look at what were their lifestyles based off of, what were their diets, what were their manners of socialization, exercise, etc. And you look at that, and I feel like some of these things that we were taught in grade school, we as humans, as we've begun doing this adulting world, and we're inundated with consumerism, is we're going against everything we were taught.
100%.
First and foremost, treat people the way you want to be treated.
Man. So powerful.
To the dude I was on the phone with today with Progressive, first 5 minutes, homeboy was so mad. Took 7 minutes for me on the phone to finally be like, hey man, I'm good. You're good. We're good. So angry. He was having a bad day. Move past that. And it's okay. 99% of the people you're going to meet are pissed off, but it's okay. Be that 1% that goes, hey, you know what? You mad at somebody recently? They leave their lights on. Let them know. What does it matter? Just help them out in that moment, because you're going to have yours. More importantly, when it comes down to the fact of just understanding that it does start in your backyard, it has to. And it's not, I love these types of conversations because I like to play devil's advocate during these. I have to do that a lot. I think, wow, what is somebody thinking about this right now? It must be nice for you guys, or look at you, or this, or you don't know what I'm going through. I don't. We don't. But I guarantee you, if we wanted to go there, I could tell you things, or you could say things, and I could make you want to. That's not the point.
It's not the point. And I think getting rid of the competition between whose life is worse is such a big step to actually understanding each other.
That's powerful, right there.
I don't need to have worse problems than you to be able to understand and empathize with what you're going through.
That's a powerful statement.
I just need to be a human being. I just need to understand that we're both dealing with life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give thanks. I'm going to give thanks if my problems aren't as bad as yours.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't think there is. I think there's value in being grateful for being in a space, whether it's this week or this year or just this time in my life where things are working and they're clicking and they're happening, because God forbid next year things look completely different.
This is a powerful statement. You know what I say a lot with people, because I talk with a lot of people. not in just in the show, but in my private life, I love communicating. That's why I started this. And people will tell me their whole lives, and I love it because I ask. I'm not sitting here like, oh God, I love it. Yeah. Those that know me, my phone all day, baby. Mm-hmm. I'll talk to you. We'll do a 5-hour stint with some of these people. Nice. I want to hear everything. Why? Because I just care. And I'm not fixing anything. Sure. Just listening. But my point is this. You know how many times I sit there and after a couple hours and I'll say, thank you for sharing, because now it makes my apple pie that much sweeter.
Man, that's great.
And it's not a hurtful thing. I'm not saying, and those that know me well know that it's not a jaded, like, thanks, now I'm cool. It's literally, I'm so sincere. And I go, I thought I had problems.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
I think it takes a lot of humility to be able to look at the context of somebody else's life and find gratitude for what's happening in your own.
Bingo.
And that isn't easy for people, mm-hmm. And I think the reaction often when people hear somebody else, just commiserating about mm-hmm. a circumstance or a relationship or whatever it is,
right.
The human reaction is to one up it. Well, this is what's going on in mine. And so then what we do is we convince ourselves that a problem that in the scheme of things is not actually that big of a deal is a much bigger deal. Because it somehow validates our perceived suffering.
Correct.
And that's such a waste of energy.
Dude, you're blowing my mind now, because we're going somewhere that's even more trippy with, if you think about it. I feel like I used to say this was super young when I was trying to find my way and I was lost, which I'm still finding my way. But I equated people's acronyms and jobs and the what do you do complex to sports teams. Because we in the States, more states than anything, more other countries, you go to other countries and those that have traveled, there's more of like they have their team, but they have their rivalries. But here in the States, there's like we have 2 football teams in Florida. Right. And not only that, but 3. Yeah, we have 3. Yeah, wouldn't be 3. My point is this: we're so apt as species, especially state-based and consumerism, and to find the delinquency. Mm-hmm. Oh, New England, I'm Cleveland. Yeah. Remember Belichick used to be. Right. You're before you know it. There is a fine line with having some polite camaraderie. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. I bet you I could beat you in a race. That's what started in the schoolyards. There's nothing wrong with thinking you're faster than somebody else.
Yeah.
But there is something genuine by getting beat.
Yeah.
And there's also something genuine with maybe it's not a race. Maybe it's time to just kind of chill. Why don't you take a walk with that person and find out that in that moment, if you think you're so it's horrible, which we all have horrible things. We're all literally every day. I was sharing this with somebody the other day. Every day on the daily basis, we're in a mental car accident. Yeah. I think so. And isn't it the irony when you're in a car accident, everybody's first reaction is to look, stare, and there's usually this inadvertent obligation to go help.
Yeah.
For those that have seen those, they're horrible. Yeah. Why can't you do that to just somebody genuinely walking by the street? That same action that you would have on a highway when someone's car just flipped over 10 times, and this superhuman strength that we can exercise.
Yeah.
Moving car. You ever notice that when in the midst of a dismay, we as a species, this isn't even a USA thing. We as a species can create miracles.
Yeah.
Why don't we have that when it's just someone walking down the street and they've got a puss on their face? Just smile. That's all it takes. It's the same thing to me that it is lifting up a car as if a car was laying on their head.
Yeah. And to just take that a step further, if we're proactive about that. If we walked out the door every day saying, my cup is full today.
Mm-hmm.
Who can I pour into?
A little bit.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
It's powerful though, because I know it sucks. It's getting hard out there. It's getting harder. I'm a guy I will always be a guy half full, pessimist kind of dude. That's what keeps it. Unfortunately, 15-ish years and being an entrepreneur, it's tough.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and make it sound like it's glitz and glams and all those that think that it's all pretty and gemstones. It's not. It's tough. Every day that word hustle is becoming one of those punchlines now. Like your middle school teacher's a hustler too. So you're not special anymore. So we're all hustling. Right. But my point is this: chill too. And I feel like if we as a society stop, I use this a lot now in my own marketing where I tell my clientele, like, stop the scroll, whatever it takes, stop the scroll. By genuinely doing it, don't say today's National Pie Day. God forbid it's happening, but fine. I would rather stop the scroll, but something genuine.
Yeah.
Tell me something, show me something, educate me.
Here's a story.
That's what's going to really resonate with consumers, I believe.
Yeah.
But stop and chill, man. It's so powerful. I would say this, personally speaking, Andrew, where are you? Are you in a good season? Are you a guy that's getting 8 to 10? Are you in a, you know what I mean? Like, how are you? Have you found balance for yourself?
That's a great question. I think, I think the last couple of years have been a time of transition for me.
Okay.
Relationships and professionally. And, I think that what I will tell you this is I think that I'm getting to a stage where I have, a more complete understanding of myself.
Powerful.
And a more complete understanding of what I need and what I'm able to offer than I think I probably ever have in my life. And I mean, there's a big conversation about my upbringing and coming from a very, very religious background and kind of the impact that that's had and continues to have. But I've found the freedom in my life personally and professionally to be much more honest about, what I need and what my family needs. I've got kids, and they're the number one priority in my life. And, and constantly looking to the ways in which I'm able to be what they need.
Right.
And to enrich myself to do that for the long term, because you pour in super hard to something for a minute and you don't pay attention to that refill. And you look up one day and you're like, man, it's empty. And then what do you do? And that's kind of when the bricks fall apart sometimes. So
powerful.
I don't know if I have a complete answer to that question.
That's a beautiful.
I think I'm trying really hard to kind of wake up every day and look at it as a gift and understand what it has to offer and what I have to offer to it. And to hold myself really accountable to that. When I get in the car at the end of the day, have I given what I was able and empowered and enriched to give today?
Right.
And to give myself the grace to say, I didn't have anything to give today. And I made it through.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I survived. And sometimes that's all you can do.
It's powerful stuff, man. I really appreciate you sharing that because it's genuine. All of this is genuine. But for those that I think falling in love with the show is because this is not scripted. And I'm getting to know you as a human being. And I think that you're a fascinating man and you're extremely intelligent. And I have to tell you this. I think if there's one thing every day I try to think to myself, not to be over here like Gandhi, I'm going to teach the world something, but for myself, I love, there's a word I learned what bona fide meant the other day. I never even, learn something every day. And I learned something that I've been trying to practice more myself in my own farm is I feel like there's always a taxing nature when you're hanging out with people.
Yeah. Using
the word hanging liberally, just meaning just you're in public.
Interacting
with human beings
100%.
is taxing. People don't realize it, but those that are in guest speaking situations, the show, after days like this is when I have podcast days, that's it usually. I don't have 17 more things to do. It's a good draining.
Right.
But people have to understand this. There's something powerful to be said that you just shared, and that is you don't have to go out there and save the whales every day. You know that it's a problem. But if your tank is empty, what in the world are you going to give me? Except for nothing but fumes, and it smells weird. Go take your time to fill up. But we're not preaching that as a consumer-based society. It's go fill up with a more faster gas, a fake gas. It's a quicker, efficient, go recharge and be ready by we'll have you ready by 9 tomorrow. And it's not right. And here's something else too. And this may hurt some people because it hurt me. But listen, some of those things that we grew up with, whether it's biblical or not, it's in scrolls that have been written way before our time, and they will be reiterated many, many moons past our living. You will reap what you sow. And if you go out and you and I want to go ahead and drink the minute this show ends until Thursday of next week, we will hurt for a very long time. The obligations, the expectations, the places, the things that we had to do will probably take, here's my theory, and I could be wrong, but as I'm beginning to adult, I realize that for as much as time as you don't do something, I feel like it takes double the time to overcompensate what you screwed up. And you know what I mean by screwed up? It's everyone's got yours. And it's not just drinking. 100%. It could be 365 days of just lying about something. And then you come out of the lie. And then day one, you want everyone around you and your own mental psyche to go, the only person that's going to do that is the guy upstairs. Right. You now have to reap what you've sown. If you've got 365 days and you've toiled nothing but horrid, wretched nonsense, spiritually or not, your car doesn't get fixed overnight.
That's right.
The more damage, the longer it fixes. And isn't it ironic? The car gets totaled. There's a point of non-fixing.
Non-fixing, yeah.
Don't get there.
Right.
And if you get to a damaged out, totaled car mentality where you're just you will need to then retransform from the scratch. But we don't teach that.
That's right.
We don't teach that. We teach buy a new one, get it this, take the pill. We'll have this 5-hour energy drink.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ready in 5 hours? It's not that, man.
Yeah.
I've learned that it takes. Isn't it funny? Sacrifice. We take that word. That word is never. You ever see that on a scroll?
Right.
And if it is, it's someone's like super religious. Sacrifice. It's like, no, it's not. It's not in people's rhetoric. It's built
into a guilt mentality.
Bingo.
And I think that's one of the most frustrating things. I think that this goes back to the human interaction piece. If I'm surrounding myself with the right kind of people on those days when I don't have anything to give, and I know that going in, where like today is all about getting to the finish line. If I'm surrounding myself with the right kind of people, those people are going to be accountable enough to me and allow me to be humble enough to say, I don't have it today.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to support me and they're going to, just lean in because a couple days later, I'm going to have a full tank because I got that day. They gifted me that day, and then they're going to have one, and I'm going to return that favor. And so, but when you approach relationships that way and you approach interaction that way, it removes the guilt of you're in a shitty mood today.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. You're in a bad mood today. I don't know what the rules are here.
No.
You're in a bad mood today, and I'm going to take that personally.
Right.
I'm going to take that as a personal affront, and I'm going to think that it's something that I've done. And so I'm going to take that home with myself, and I'm not going to even let you have an input in the conversation.
Right.
I'm going to make assumptions. I'm going to draw conclusions. And then when I need you to support me the next day, I've put a divide in our relationship. It's completely unfounded, and if we remove that guilt of saying, hey, I'm having a bad day and I don't have a lot to give you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the humility with me to say, no problem. What do you need? What can I do?
Right.
Or I don't need to do anything. I'll just leave you alone.
Just be.
Then when the roles get reversed, there isn't that divide. It never even came to be.
Powerful stuff, man.
I think,
and I'm learning this too. Once again, this cliche thing that we've said since we were little kids, treat people the way you want to be treated. I think you can amplify that by saying, literally treat people the way that you're willing to be treated.
Yeah.
So what this hurts a lot of people, but I'm very honest these days. When people ask me to bring them to the airport, I sincerely say no.
Yeah.
Because I will never ask them. So I'll be prepared for that. So don't be sowing things you ain't ready to when they come back your way. But what I will do is I'll get you an Uber.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like driving an hour and a half. I love you, but that drive back's gonna be horrible.
Or I can't.
Or I don't want to.
I'm not able to.
Or the no thank you is something I wish also was, use the word preached, but discussed more. The no thank you factor is a very powerful thing.
Instead of no, I'm sorry.
Or my leg fell off.
Yeah. This was revolutionary. It was a lesson I learned over the summer along with a friend of mine. And the difference between replacing apologies with gratitude.
Oofa.
Instead of I'm sorry I can't do that. Thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you being willing to ask, but I can't. And just being able to own your space and to own what it is that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And how much better is it to be constantly topping off our tank than having to wait till it gets still empty to refill?
Oof. It's funny you said that. Just thinking, don't they say, I'm not a car guy, mechanical-wise. You're not supposed to let your car go all the way.
The tank full.
Because it absorbs the poop. Yeah. Powerful stuff, man.
Yeah.
Something else that someone said something powerful the other day too. I think there's a really important factor in human species where there's a pray to your, I hope everyone has some kind of higher being, whether it's an alien or a person. I don't really care what it is. Just find some kind of higher calling because they're there. More importantly, there is a difference between praying and meditating, which was powerful. I had a friend say that to me the other day after the show. And I'm not really like a meditator guy. But I do think a lot. And I think it's very important to think about yourself and be alone. I think it's very important not to have a lot of noise, because when there's no noise, you can hear. And if you don't like what you're hearing, don't run from it.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing. And that's okay not to like what you're hearing.
Figure out how to change the
I still deal with that on a daily basis. So but it's good to deal with it. Mm-hmm. It's good to talk with yourself. And if you don't run, don't run to the phone. Don't distract it. Deal with it. But like you said, there is something powerful with, I said this to a friend one day after many moons of just talking with them. And I said, life is like a fish tank, right? And the irony with the fish tank is you pick your fish. They're expensive too. So fish are pretty. You pick the most expensive ones. They look cool. But they do nothing. So you have fish in your life. And those people are the analogy of, you have fish friends.
Yeah.
Then you have filter friends. And then you have the water in which you're living in.
Your environment, yeah.
The light could be the equivalent to whatever God you serve. The soil in which but all of it is maintenance. Leave your fish tank for 1 day, 2 days, 3, depending on how many fish you have, depending on the type of tank you have.
Yep.
All of this plays a factor of who you are.
Yeah.
You're a simple tank with one little fish. It's a boring tank, but I bet you it's going to be a lot easier to maintain.
Yeah.
You got a lot of fishies, which we can have. It's fun to have a lot of fishies, a lot of shit. It's very taxing. Not only on your pocketbook, here.
Mentally.
And I feel like I really appreciate you sharing, because all of this comes full circle with, we don't know what the hell's going on with this dementia and Alzheimer's and this overall health factor in general. We are deteriorating horribly. And I would love to be part of the solution where we spread the education and spread the curiosity and to learn what could happen with your immediate 6 inches in front of your face.
So there's a couple of things, and if I can speak kind of specifically to that world, I think there's a few things that we can start to do that. Yeah, please. Yes, I'm good. Thank you. I think that the conversation about dementia needs to change significantly. First of all, when it comes to how we understand the people that are living with the disease, and I've lost count of the number of support groups that I've been to, the number of talks that I've given, the number of times I've sat in an office with a family who's telling me their story. And invariably, those conversations start with, well, my dad has, or, my mom has. Right. And what we do is we begin to identify the people that are living with this disease by the diagnosis that they have. And as we continue to have the conversation in that terms, it skews our entire context of who that person is to the diagnosis that they have.
Wow.
What's really sad about that is that this is a disease that affects us late in life. Obviously, it's starting to happen earlier. But even let's say 56 is the youngest person I've taken care of. He got diagnosed at 55. For 54 years, that disease had zero impact on who he was as a person, on his story, on his legacy. He served in the Navy. He was a pilot. He worked with NASA. All of that stuff happened before he was diagnosed. And then for some reason, because of how we talk about this disease, in a couple of years, he just became, the guy who had this disease. And I think that that's really sad. And it also has a very big impact in how we address the symptoms of the disease. So, symptom management is kind of one of the biggest conversations that we're having, those of us who manage a community that cares for this disease, whether it's part of a bigger assisted living facility or it's a standalone, like what I do. And for a long time, we talked about pharmaceuticals a lot earlier. For a long time, pharmaceutical management for behavioral expression was just the status quo. That's just how if they're acting out, if they've got anxiety, if they've got behaviors, they're wandering, we need to find a pill that's going to deal with that. Unfortunately, all of the pharmaceuticals that are available on the market still to this day manage those behavioral expressions by muting the either psychological, cognitive, or biological functions that are causing the behavior. So I'm going to give you something that's going to make you less anxious by reducing that chemical compound in your brain. I'm going to reduce your wandering by giving you a medication that's going to make you more tired. I'm going to reduce your, violent outbursts by giving you a medication that, is going to mute everything. And, the problem with that is that if we mute one part of a person's personality, we mute the whole thing. Powerful. And that I think is the saddest part about that part of the business right now is you'll walk into a facility and you've got a bunch of people that are, sitting in wheelchairs, watching TV, drooling on their shirt, and it's the stigma. That's where it comes from.
Right.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to interact with some professionals in the industry over the last few years who have really kind of changed my thinking about that. And what we've got is an understanding of cognitive anchors. So I was talking about earlier that as dementia starts to affect the brain, it actually begins to shrink the brain mass.
Wow.
So if you think about Daytona to Orlando, right? We've got that nice I-4 corridor that goes there. So let's say that, one day somebody brought in 35 truckloads of dirt and just dumped them across the I-4 corridor. Right. And, traffic is stopped going both ways. We can't send traffic to Orlando to enjoy the theme parks, and they can't come here to enjoy the beaches. Well, Orlando is fortunate enough to have connections to a bunch of other parts of Florida.
Okay.
That I-4 doesn't have anything to do with.
Right.
So Orlando's going to be fine. There's still going to be people that can get to Orlando to enjoy the theme parks. Their tourism might take a little bit of a hit, but not a huge one.
Right.
Daytona is going to have a real problem because I-4 dumps in most of our traffic. Right. Probably 95% of it. Right. So if nobody does anything about that giant truckload of dirt that's across I-4, our hotels are not going to be booked as often. There's going to be fewer people at our beaches. People aren't going to enjoy the restaurants anymore. They're not going to go out to our nightclubs. They're not going to come see shows at the Peabody. And as that traffic shrinks, Daytona is going to get smaller and smaller.
Wow.
Nothing is done about it. Daytona wouldn't be here for very long. Okay, so that's exactly what happens in the brain when the neurotransmitters get affected, whether it's by plaque, whether it's by inflamed blood vessels, by a variety of things. That's exactly what happens. So that central core of the brain remains intact and is still able to communicate with other parts of the brain. Right. But where the plaque buildup happens, that part of the brain, it deteriorates and it eventually dies. So if you look at a brain pre-diagnosis, post-diagnosis, the only way to accurately diagnose dementia in any state is to do an MRI. We have to take a picture of the brain. Right. You're actually going to see shrinkage of the brain.
It's incredible.
So a lot of times we use vernacular like mom has forgotten who her husband was or dad has forgotten who his daughter is. Well, they didn't forget. They literally don't have access to the part of the brain where that memory used to live. Because if I forgot where my keys are, theoretically, I can remember. I'll find them. Wow. Because I'll be able to go if I look hard enough, I'll be able to get to where my keys were. But what's happening in their brain is somebody's taking those keys and they're melting them down, shipping off the brick of melted metal, dropping it in the ocean. It's gone. Vaporizing it. So what becomes very important for people that are living with dementia is the parts of the brain that still exist. Okay. And this is why we'll see changes in personality. This is why we'll see regressive memory behavior. This is why we'll see changes in, dad never used to be, sexually provocative. He never would say stuff like that. And now all of a sudden he is. Well, the part of his brain that put that filter before doesn't exist anymore. So he literally doesn't have access to that behavior anymore. So what we have, Chenzo, is we have what we call cognitive anchors. These are parts of the brain that are still easily accessible. If you're living with dementia and all of a sudden parts of your memory just don't exist anymore, it's a terrifying experience, right? You wake up one day, you see somebody that you're in pictures with, that there's a photo album from a wedding day that you just have no memory of and no access to that memory. That's terrifying. Well, if there's still a part of my brain that remembers my service in the Army, if there's still a part of my brain that remembers an old girlfriend, if there's still a part of my brain that remembers a city that I used to live in, then those parts of my brain, those memories become very comfortable and secure for me because I can access them easily. Right. I can find peace there because there's no haziness, there's no cloudiness, there's no confusion. I can be absolutely sure about that. So that's what we call cognitive anchors. So when we talk about behavior management, and this is where this part of the business I think gets really cool. We talk about behavior management. We have one of two things. We can do behavior management through behavior modification, or we can do it through pharmaceutical intervention. With behavior modification, we're going to work really hard to be the detective to identify what those cognitive anchors are. Okay. That job that you had 40 years ago, that girlfriend that you had when you were in your 20s, that routine that you had when your kids were in school. And we're going to try and surround your daily life with as many parts of that cognitive anchor as we can. Wow. And we're going to let you live inside of that reality. I hear this all the time and it infuriates me. Well, just because they don't remember doesn't mean you should lie to them. And it is such a contradiction if we actually understand what's happening in the brain, because the part of their brain that would tell them what reality you and I are living in doesn't exist. So we're asking them to participate in a reality that they have no access to.
Not on a tangent, but is that a big controversial issue with your industry in general?
Huge.
Wow.
I've lost track of the number of times that I've brought in a new staff member who was arguing with a resident in the middle of the dining room. No, Mrs. Jones, your husband is dead. He's not coming back. And Mrs. Jones is distraught. Well, she no longer has access to the memory of her husband's funeral. Wow. So we're not lying to them. It is important for us who have fully functional cognitive abilities to step into their reality.
Right.
It's much easier for me to do that than it is for them. It's impossible for them to step into mine.
Wow.
We had a resident once. She had been with us for several years, and we were finding her increasingly agitated between like 2:30 and 3:30, which is pretty early for sundowning behaviors. Typically, we'd see sundowning happen around 5 or 6. And we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't understand it. She was crying. She was very nonverbal. So she'd lost kind of her speech interaction very early. She was very nonverbal. So it was hard for her to communicate why she was agitated. But the timing was, super consistent. So we really dug into her life history, talked to the family, like, what did mom do?
Right.
2:30 to 3:30. Was she at a job? Did she have friends?
Right.
Did she play bingo? Did she, go to the country club? And the kids were sitting there in our office going, no, mom was always home. And that was the great thing, is that every day when we got home from school, mom would be home and she'd be there and she'd be on the porch waiting for us and she'd greet us. And man, the light bulbs just started. I still get goosebumps. The light bulb started to go off.
She's waiting for
her kids to get home from school. Wow. Damn, man. So we'd set her up a rocking chair on the back porch.
This is amazing.
We'd have the care staff come in and just play a role. Hey, mom, school is great today. We just play a role. She'd be great. She'd ask them about their day, or as much as she could.
This is fast. This is amazing.
And the agitation would go away, and then she'd go right into the dining room for dinner, and then the rest of her afternoon was fine.
Who's giving this? I love you.
Yeah.
I love you so much. You're Patch Adams. I love that you are in such a ugly situation, but yet you're treated. It's harder to do what you're doing than it would be the other way. The pills.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% harder.
And I appreciate that about you. And it's very, I can't imagine the mental anguish and the taxing nature to come up with individualized fairy tales for these people.
I'll tell you this though, man, it's magic.
I can't imagine. I'm remembering now, I don't want to get just sidetracked, but I got to get there.
Yeah.
But more importantly, who is opposing you of let's just call it fairy tales?
Uh-huh.
Is it the residents' families? Who comes to you and goes, this is wrong? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
nobody. Here's it. I have yet to experience the time. What we're doing now, it's unopposed because it's so revolutionary. What we're doing now has not been practiced in the industry for ever. We just always threw pills at it. I mean, you got to think about, in the 70s, we were putting people in mental institutions because they had dementia.
Right.
I mean, memory care wasn't even a thing.
Right.
We were putting them in straitjackets and padded rooms. And that was 40 years ago.
Right.
So nobody is opposing it, especially when they see the outcomes. And I talk with my staff all the time that what we do is magic, because the first time you put the detective hat on, you dig in, and then you put that behavioral intervention in place and it works.
I can't imagine.
I mean, it's magic.
So here you are. God, man, I can't say anything more than
and forgive me, I don't want it, and we do all of that without ever crossing the integrity of their dignity, their individuality, or their access to basic quality of life.
Right.
They don't have drugs that are keeping them in bed. They don't have drugs that remove their taste buds, because they do. They don't have drugs that make them sleep more than they normally would, because they do. They don't have drugs that affect their urinary incontinence or their bowel incontinence, because those drugs do. So we get to give them all of those parts of their life, get to stay intact. And we get to interact with a memory of theirs that is life-giving.
It's got to be so euphoric to see these people exercise happiness or some kind of recognition or recollection of what they're doing. So here you are, you're like this gumshoe detective, and you're helping these people. I would imagine it now. It correlates very well with, I know dehydration is a huge thing amongst huge. And now they're revolutionizing these things that you can like eat and things of nature that make you hydrate, etc. But you're going even further than that, where it's not just dietary. You're stimulating their brain. This is a very powerful thing, by the way. And I want to just go back to the fact that for those that are dealing with this, with a family member or a friend, I've never heard it broken down to they haven't forgot. They just don't have access to it. That is a powerful thing, man. And not that it makes it any better, but at least educates.
It's huge.
And it's got to help.
It changes the way you have the conversation.
Right. And I've, once again, being very candid, I haven't been affected by it like in my own home. You know, like I didn't have a lot of dialogue. You know, it was, I don't know if it was a good or a bad thing, but it happened so fast too. But for those that may be dealing with it where it's right there, I'm sure it's got to be the mental anguish on your behalf where you're sometimes like, why are you not just walking over there to go to the bathroom? Like, what is there? They don't have, it's not that they've forgotten, they don't have access to it. Do you believe that, is there hope in fixing it?
I think so.
Me too.
You know, I mean, we live in a world where we're making anything possible.
Right.
And I've put enough of I'll tell you this, I've put enough of my life into what I'm doing at this point. I refuse to believe that there isn't.
Amen. I agree with you.
There's got to be.
Has to be.
We just got to keep working towards it. I'll tell you this, you know, and maybe in closing, you know, one of the lessons I've learned dealing with my own family and then just dealing with hundreds and hundreds of people is that you can't be a caregiver and a family member. You're going to be one or the other. If you're a great caregiver, you're going to have to give up parts of who you are as that person's family because you have to make hard decisions. You have to do things that you wish you didn't have to do. You got to change bed sheets and you got to deal with stuff that you just wouldn't want to deal with your mom, your aunt, your grandma. If you just lean in super hard to being a family member, you're not going to make good decisions as a caregiver. And that's what people like the people in my industry do, is we are the caregivers, you know, and
you can separate.
Man, we can. And I think we're able to do amazing things for our residents. Being able to give back the gift of a relationship between kids and their parents, kids and their grandparents is an amazing thing. And I'll tell you this, you know, I was talking to a guy once, a couple facilities ago, and it was his wife who was living with us, and we were talking. I said, you know, hey, I know how hard this is to deal with your wife. And he looked at me, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, that woman hasn't been my wife for a few years. Damn. And he said, he was torn up with guilt, and he said, you know, I don't feel guilty about putting her here. I feel guilty about how much I resent her because I've had to take care of somebody for the last 3 years that I didn't marry. And I never thought of that. Never occurred to me, you know, that one day you wake up and you're fully responsible for a person that you don't even know.
Right. And
the person that, what it does is it takes away your ability to grieve for the person that you lost. He never got to grieve for his wife. And again, because that woman left when the disease came up. And so his ability to grieve over his marriage, over the life that they had together was superseded by his responsibility to care for somebody that he didn't know or recognize and couldn't understand and couldn't interact with. And so I think one of the best parts about my job, Chenzo, is the ability to step in and say, we're going to take that off your plate.
Right.
We're going to make sure she's safe. We're going to make sure she's comfortable. We're going to give her quality of life. We're going to deal with those memories that you haven't had to deal with in years. We're going to live in a fantasy land that frustrates you and you don't understand and you don't know how to interact with.
Right.
We're going to handle the same question that gets asked 35 times a day. You grieve for your wife. You come and enjoy those moments of clarity when she recognizes you and can have a nice lunch with you. You rest.
Right.
Refill your cup.
Right.
Take care of your own health. And, And I think it's a gift we get to give people.
Is it safe to say you're almost inadvertently treating
just as much?
Wow.
Just as much. I think that our business is just as much about the caregivers and the family members of our residents as it is about the residents themselves. Sadly, we often get our residents in the very twilight of their life. And the work that we're able to do often gives some margin to the people that have been caring for them, whether it's family members or loved ones or friends, that gives them the rest of their life back.
Right.
I've lost track of the number of times that I have had a family member end up in the hospital because they were so overextended in the care that they were giving for the person that was ultimately the resident.
This is amazing stuff, man.
Yeah.
Is this common amongst this demographic? Are most facilities looking at it as, I would say, as amazing and loving and as Patch Adams as you are?
I think it's moving that direction. I really do.
Okay.
I'm very excited about where our industry is heading with memory care across the board.
Amazing.
And I'm blessed to have some great relationships with industry leaders who are really pioneering this conversation, and that's why I've gotten to be a part of it. I think it's moving the right direction. I think our battles down the road are going to be with pharmaceutical companies who are making billions of dollars on Ativan and Halidol and Seroquel. I think that our fights are going to be, unfortunately, with large-scale operators who own, 200 or 300 facilities and are running based on a bottom line and not based on quality of care, not based on, workforce retention. And I think that those are the hurdles ahead of us. But I think that as the consumer population, as the people who need what we do, continue to see outcomes like the ones that are happening in the buildings that I get to work with at Ormond Manor, I think that the demand is, people are going to start saying, I'm not going to put my mom here if you just put pills in her.
Right.
I'm not going to put my dad here if you're not making a difference in his life.
Right.
I'm not going to put up with it. And that's what's going to be ultimately, I think, what shapes what the industry looks like. And look, 40% of a quarter of the population is going to be diagnosed before the age of 65. That's my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversation is, it has to change. Has to change. And I think that we're at a stage where we have enough understanding, where there are outcomes happening every single day at my community, at other communities, with great people and great operators and great caregivers, that by the time that wave starts to happen, if it's 40% now, it'll be 50% in 10 years, it'll be 60% after that. And I think the earlier we can catch the disease, the better. But there's going to be an understanding at that point of how things should be treated and managed, and people just aren't going to put up with less than quality and less than an empathetic approach to what we do. So
for those that are listening or end up talking about this episode, and I would say the precursor to me even asking you this, without a doubt, I would really like you to just be, don't worry about this is not at all medical advice, peoples. But out of my own curiosity, if you're allowed to answer candidly, if someone's dealing with this beginning, middle, or end stage of whatever we want to, are there some things that you could say to somebody right now that personally and professionally that someone could do, or maybe some act, I don't know. Is that
so the first thing somebody should do, if you've got a loved one who's living with dementia and you're an active caregiver in their life, you've got to find a support group to plug into. The number one thing I hear from people when they come to us is, I've just felt like I'm so alone. I'm dealing with this all by myself. And the fact of the matter is, you're not.
Right.
There are hundreds and thousands of people in Flagler and Volusia County that are dealing with the exact same thing that you are. You need to find a support group. The Alzheimer's Association is an amazing resource for locating those. In Flagler Beach and Palm Coast, there's like 4 that I know of that happen on a weekly basis. You can go talk to other people, interact with other people that are dealing with the exact same thing that you're dealing with your loved one. Go do that. It'll refill your cup. It'll help you plug into a network of people that can support you and encourage you. And it's going to give you access to more resources and understanding. The second thing you need to do is you need to start making plans for the future. Ormond Manor is not the resource for everybody. As far as where people should place their parent or their loved one, we hope to be the placement for, we've got 24 apartments for at least 24 families. We would love to be a resource, and we want to be. But with that being said, we are working very hard to be the experts in dementia care. And we have a lot of experience behind us. We have a lot of passion and heart behind us. So if you don't think you can afford us, if you don't think we're the right fit, that's fine. We come to work every day to help people just like you, whether you live with us or you don't.
Right.
Come talk to us, ask questions, let us help you, point you towards medical resources, towards support resources, and even towards financial resources. We work very closely with the Veterans Association. We work very closely with several attorneys that do Medicaid planning and estate planning. We can help you chart a course, whether that course ends with your loved one living with us or not. That is not our investment. Our investment is making sure that people that are caregivers for people living with dementia know what the resources are that are available to them and can get their questions answered. And then the last thing, and this is probably the most difficult conversation, is that if you think it's happening, it probably is.
Is that like is that kind of like amongst...
It's not always true. It's not always true. And I would love to be the guy that gets to say your dad doesn't have dementia. Right. You're not, what you're dealing with is not what you think it is. I'd love to have that conversation. I don't remember the last time I did. Your life only gets worse. Their life only gets worse if you're not dealing with what it is.
Is there like hot topics from a layman's perspective that are more than just like losing your keys or something? Or is it, I don't want to.
Yeah, but those are good places to start, and I don't want it to be too cliche, but if you know your loved one's behavior patterns and you see an aberration, go talk to somebody. The best news in the world at the end of that conversation is, no, they're fine.
You're overreacting.
Having a bad day.
Are there, once again, I don't want to cross any lines because I know, but are there some like don't goes and don't do's because they would just get them on it? You know what I mean? Like my immediate thought is, are there facilities to avoid because there isn't going to be, and I don't want you naming out any places, but like, are there kind of like some safe places that people can go to that aren't just pill mills, so to speak?
Yeah, always start with your doctor. Always start with your general practitioner.
Okay.
In most cases, that general practitioner is going to have a good history of what your loved one has dealt with.
Right.
And that's valuable data, and when you have those conversations, it's the same rule of thumb. Don't leave anything out when you talk to the doctor. Don't hide anything. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't cover it up. Give them the whole picture.
Right.
And make sure that you get all your questions answered, and look, it's still an inconclusive science unless we're going to just put them under an MRI every month for the next 6 months, which I wouldn't advise anybody to do. It's going to be an inconclusive picture. But if the conversation starts to happen, even if you're early in the process, the point that you get to a decision-making time where we say we've got to bring care into the home, we've got to put mom somewhere.
Right.
It's not a surprise. The saddest day in my life is when I meet a family for the first time in a hospital room. And the reason that I'm there is because they've called us because somebody in that hospital said, your dad can't go home. Figure it out. And that's happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and it's heartbreaking. I don't want to meet you that way. I want to meet you when nothing's going on. I want to meet you when there's no concerns. I want to get to know you and your family and your loved one when you're not worried about dad walking into somebody else's house, when you're not worried about mom taking the car and ending up in Tampa.
Right.
I want to meet you before all of that, because then I'm going to be able to guide. I'm going to be able to answer questions. I'm going to be able to point you towards resources. And then hopefully when you do make a decision about where to put your loved one, you're doing it with somebody that you trust.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge amount of trust. And I don't want you to have to give me all of that trust in a hospital room 15 minutes after we met.
And you said this earlier, in crisis mode.
In crisis mode.
Not cool.
It's not.
Your irrational decisions.
And most of the time at that point, dementia isn't the biggest of our problems. It's dementia plus a broken hip. It's dementia plus congestive heart failure. It's dementia plus, whatever.
Right.
Which makes dealing with the disease 10 times harder.
Powerful.
So, that's, my hope today was really to
make sure that you are, man, that was a powerful thing you said too about you can't be a family member and a caregiver. And that's a powerful statement, man.
It's one of the biggest things I preach. Because one of the biggest things that comes along with the decision to place mom or dad someplace, or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is the guilt that's associated with that. That, well, I'm their son and now I'm putting them away. Well, the longer that you continue to be the caregiver, the less you become their son. So let me give that back to you. Let me take that guilt off your plate. What you are in fact doing is you're giving your dad his son back. You're giving yourself your father back.
Right.
And there's nothing more important than that. There just isn't. Those relationships are all that matters in life. And people need to know that there's some safety there. There's some freedom there.
Right. That's powerful stuff, man. I'm sure you've heard this statement before when people say like, I love you to death. Well, you really are. You may be loving them to death. Like let them, it's a powerful thing, man. I ask most of everyone that comes on the show. I think it goes without asking you, but I would say, are you open to, I've tagged you on here.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone did want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, by all means. So our Facebook page is a huge resource right now.
Okay.
Plugs directly into the blog that's on our website, facebook.com/Orman Manor. We're responsive on Facebook. That'll tag you right into our Instagram page as well.
Okay.
And then our website has a great blog that we're trying to add resources to all the time. It's ormanmanor.com.
Okay.
But please connect with us. And look, I monitor that personally. So if you've got questions, just reach out. We'll plug in and look, we're not going to beat anybody over the head with emails every week or phone calls every week. That's just not how we do business. We're a very boutique. We have 24 apartments. We're not a huge facility trying to get whoever we can. We want to take care of people that need what we do. And in the meantime, there's going to be a lot of people outside those 24 apartments. We want to help those people too. Right. We want to be a resource for those people too. Because ultimately at the end of the day, we believe in caregiving for the caregiver, and being a resource.
It's awesome stuff, man. And I think what I love about you more than anything is that you are aware of the fact that you are limited. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful thing when a human being accepts the fact that there is only 10 digits on your fingers.
That's it.
And you are aware of that. You are extremely well rooted with that. And I think it's powerful that I think it's a safe statement to brand you as someone that's trying to, of course, the romanticism of eradicating the disease would, I think we want to say that.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong. But I think you're practical when at least we're trying to make it better.
We want to make a footprint here.
Right. Start now. I mean?
And right now we can touch Flagler County. We can touch Volusia County. So let's make a footprint here and then see what happens.
Start now.
Yeah.
Dude, I can't thank you enough.
Thanks for having me, man.
Anything else? Did we do it?
This is great. Yeah. Good job.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now what I'll do is I'll tag I know maybe we didn't lose 2. You were good luck. Where are we? We glitchy?